Welcome, IT changemakers, to the Deck Show with Tim Flower and Tom McGraw. Let's get into it.
Hello, changemakers. Welcome back to the Deck Show. I'm Tom McGraw. I'm here with Tim Flower. Tim, I got a question for you to kick things off today.
Hit me. Go for it.
Where are you going to be 2025 for 30th of September? On the spot. On the spot. Does he know?
It's gonna be one city or the other for experience, Tom. I can't wait.
You're gonna be in London town, surely,
Yeah, man.
Tim. Exactly so. As anybody who listens to this show knows, you might call Next Think Experience the event to our podcast, the sister event to our podcast. And indeed, you can already, I believe, book yourself tickets, and you can book in for going to London on the 30th of September in the beautiful Intercontinental Hotel there, or you can book in if you're on the other side of the world for Boston. On the 14th to the 15th of October. The first ever 2-day event, Tim, properly speaking.
It's nice to see 2 days at both cities. And you know what? If you're so inclined, do both of them. Go to both, Tom.
We do quite often, don't we, Tim? And we enjoy it. We enjoy it. Yeah, you should do the same. And why do I mention it? Not only because you can book your tickets now, and there will be links in the show notes to do so, but because it brought to mind because if you were at London Experience 2024 and you were there for the opening ceremony, as we called it, you would have seen a very charming and eloquent speaker on that main stage as part of the opening panel discussion. He's Robin Milton-Schönemann, and he's our very special guest today, and we'll get into why he's been able to join us shortly. But welcome, Robin. It's lovely to have you, my friend.
Great to meet you again. I'm hoping to continue the trend of hopefully sharing something people will think is worth listening to. So nice of you to bring me on.
Without a doubt. And if you are seeing any of it, you can see some of the snippets, video snippets on social media for our recordings, even though most of the episodes are audio only, as regular listeners no doubt know. Robin's found a very beautiful spot. Is that in your house, Robin? You're surrounded by books. You've got a globe, a sort of a fish in a case. You've got fantastic shelf game going on.
I wish I knew more about the fish, but no, actually, we're visiting the in-laws at the moment. So I took full liberty to use their little library nook as my background. So I look far more sophisticated than my own home. I thought it was only fitting.
I think so. I think we should look as sophisticated as possible for such occasions. And what have you been up to, Robin? How's it all going?
Well, I mean, since we last spoke, I've been on the hunt for my next venture. So where I can next lead an organization for change. And what we're going to talk about in a moment, I guess, is around digital experience and what we can do next. Still very much looking, but I've mostly been keeping up with some practice and DIY in between because I also moved recently. So a man with many strings to my bow.
Lovely. A transitional phase in your life, by the sounds of it, man. And this is one of the reasons we wanted to catch up, to do a bit of a retrospective of your time at Man Group and look at some of the highlights and the overall shape of your project there. I think one of the things that always struck me about your work at Man Group when we spoke during your time there was how your IT organization there saw itself as much more than just a technology provider. How would you describe the ethos behind how you worked, first of all?
Well, I think there's a few things, but the simplest way I tried to boil it down to was I often ask the question, "Are you having a good time?" I use this as a litmus test to try and figure out, are we doing the right thing, right? Are we spending all of this effort and this time? Pandemic happened, and I'm sure many can recognize the situation. We had to quickly adopt to a more agile way of working. There were lots of change. It was very easy to get bogged down on what are the tech decisions we should be making. But I always try to retain that idea of are you having a good time? Because if we're just replacing one thing with something that might potentially be worse, then we've spent all of that effort and people like us less. That feels like a wasted effort. So it really is a very simple question, I think, but it's much harder in execution. And I think we had some really interesting challenges. We moved towards more of an agile, everyone gets a laptop, you can have flexibility type approach. But what we learned was also we went out, we got the best kit we could buy for the budget we had, which was very decent. So we weren't really constrained in that sense. But every once in a while, we'd encounter someone who just vehemently opposed to it. They said, I absolutely don't dig this at all. And I won't name any names, but we've had some great feedback from that because one person came back to us and said, "Look, I've got poor eyesight. I don't care about anything other than how big can you make the laptop," which is the opposite of 99% of almost every other piece of feedback we got. And it just showed this nuance that, when people is involved, you think you're doing the right choice. You don't really know it until you put it out into the world. So we always brought it back to, are you having a good time? And then trying to see like each individual and sometimes just realizing, well, for you, we're going to do a special thing. And sometimes, well, it was just a matter of opinion. Maybe we have a different variation that works for you.
So they wanted the biggest, bulkiest laptop possible. Yeah, I guess that is an unusual request.
Oh yeah, that is a very unusual request, but it was like because the eyesight was diminished, and I was like, okay, well that makes so much sense when I know your context, and I could emphasize that, and then he would have a terrible time with a small laptop, because
Yeah,
so
of course.
I think we tried to work that into everything that we did, and it also came kind of from some of the values of the organization. They often talked about meritocracy and how clients should be at the focus of everything that's being done. So we just translated that to be, well, what is the best thing we can do internally for our internal clients, i.e. our own company? So it felt very natural to continue what I think is a personal mindset, that what's the best service we can provide with the values of the company.
And we should stress it's an investment management firm, right? So that's going to align with, I guess, very valuable human capital, and you want to be tailoring the technology provision to those individual contributors.
Exactly, and so these are all. I'm sure there's plenty of companies that had a lot of intelligent people, but basically, what we realized is that there were certain instances where if this person isn't productive for 2 days, well, you could have bought 20 laptops worth of equipment or whatever it might be for that downtime, right? So it gave a really interesting impetus that we use this often, and it's like, okay, well, is this a good thing? Because you can never really protect yourself. Someone's just not going to like what you're doing, but you can always try to make it as generally acceptable as possible. And if you're showing a willingness to engage in those conversations, sometimes we sidestep. There were individuals where we went, okay, we're going to go off piece. We're going to do something completely bespoke for you because, context matters. Again, this person really needed a bigger screen for their eyesight. There were other examples that maybe a bit more in-depth and technical, but we tried to adopt to those circumstances because no one really has perfect information, right? So it was one of the reasons why we got so interested in the sentiment thing. And I know I'm probably jumping ahead. Well, we'll talk about that in a second, I'm sure. But
fair. No, let's get really concrete with it, Robin. Let's think about something like a new hire. Walk us through your team's involvement in that whole process. And I know from having read about Man Group before that this whole process begins way before the official onboarding process begins, right? Like from the moment of the hire almost. And what were teams missing out if they? What are other teams out there missing out if they don't engage on that such an early stage even?
yeah, and I think I'll split it into a few different ways. We started, if we started months and years before we even got a new hire, the engineering decisions we tried to make was we made sure that we had. I sometimes also talked about the illusion of choice because most people don't want to have an Amazon-like experience with 2,000 products they can pick and choose because you're overwhelmed. You want to have a curated list of, here's my top three, and you pick the one that aligns with you. So we tried to very hard to make sure that our hardware choices and the services we provided essentially boil down to, do you like a Mac? Do you like a Windows? And then we tried to provide a bit of guidance around that, going, your peers in your team or in your department all have this or the other, and tried to use a bit of that context again to suggest you're probably best off with this one, but we're not going to stop you if you want one or the other, except in those instances where your job role required one above the other. So one of the engineering facets, so we try to really keep that trim, we try to keep that easy, we try to give that illusion of choice where essentially we knew, pick any of these, they're all high-end equipment, it's down to your personal preference. We then continued that with making sure that we had as many applications automated as possible. I'm sure everyone has come across the discussion about, should we have Edge or Chrome or Firefox or Opera or whatever web browser? And instead of shying away from that and trying to go, okay, well, this is the only one that we're providing, we provided 3 options predominantly. And we tried to do that for all of the applications that, from a company perspective, doesn't really matter. Well, you're going to have to use the accountancy software that we provide because that's where the accounts are. But for all of the other things, and I think you may have heard me talk about this before, is try to separate what is a tech decision from your subjective opinion. Is the tech decision really you must have Chrome or you must have Edge, or is it you must have a modern browser? And then have the wisdom to separate that. So we did loads of work on the front just to make sure that everyone could get the good stuff when they came to the engagement. So then when you come to the engagement, so we're about 3 months out from you joining, the teams would, the hiring manager would often be prompted to go, actually, what do you want to talk to the team? And I think there's so much untapped potential here in the onboarding, and we could talk about some ideas I have for what we could even do more. But we essentially started with, back to that single question, do you want a Mac or a Windows? And we then guide you through those options because we knew all of what everyone else in your team had. So we would rarely let you just see the entire unfiltered list. It would already be a curated list of a curated list where we'd go, hey, your peers has this, because we also had some bespoke versions for developers where they also got very heavy computational capacity in our clusters and any other services that maybe a normal office worker wouldn't get. So we curated those really hard. We gave them that interaction. And then what we learned when we did the transformation to laptops during the pandemic is, if we structure it, we give you a date when your kit's going to arrive before you even started. We schedule an onboarding session with you for just as that has arrived. Then you already have a timeline for when I'm going to get kit. You know what kit you're going to get. And you already know over here is someone who's going to help me. And we intentionally made it so that we had maybe 2 days between, on average, from you receiving the kit to having the onboarding, because we wanted people to test a little, just have a play, log on. It's not really urgent yet, but get familiar. So when you got to the onboarding, we tried to avoid those conversations of, oh yeah, I haven't opened it yet, or oh no, the delivery was late. And we found that was so successful. We worked that into our day-to-day processes. So all of the teams across the globe then started doing, when we had new joiners, we'd schedule in 2 hours with them on the second day or something like that. We would, first day, most of the time actually, here's your kit, let me go through that, let me get you started. So people felt welcomed and looked after all the way through. And we did that, from engineering that no one will see to the hands-on people who helped you on your first day, who you then would have a relationship with and go, I want to talk to that person again if I know they're going to help me if I need something. So we try to really focus on all of those aspects. I think there's so much more we could do in this area as well.
But you got a great approach to it, right? There's a fine line between needing standards, managing cost, reducing even the volume of patches that you need, and balancing that with the need for some level of flexibility, right? Tom and I use Chrome when we record this podcast, but I use Edge as my primary browser, and there's no conflict between the two as long as I've got compatibility for my apps. Things work fine. But the onboarding piece has been it's a perennial problem for IT teams because of the complexity that's involved, a lot of teams that are involved in the onboarding are not in IT. You've got to get other teams involved to create that full blown process. I've written about it recently because it's a complicated thing. You've talked about some of the outcomes and the things you drove to do. How did the teams actually create those seamless, personalized experiences for new employees? What's the back end look like?
Well, I mean, one of the hard points, and you touched on that, is logistics, right? Because
Yeah.
I'll go out on a limb and say most of our enterprise companies right now still need to do some type of stock maintenance. So if that's predicting, are we having 100 new joiners next month or 10 or whatever? And I think what we found early in the process was we ended up going, okay, well, we need to buy one of this or one of this. And when we actually retrospectively looked at how much hardware we bought across the world, we could make a pretty good guess on what we needed the next 3 months. And we never encountered a situation where we went, shoot, we've bought too many laptops. No one wants them. That never occurred in our entire. So what we did was we took away some of the headache from that and let a team self-manage stock so that you always had, again, the curated list, always have some of that stock in, always replenish it, always make sure that it comes. Because what we found, to come back to your seamless transition, sometimes the line manager had just made a decision, which may or may not be what the person who was joining us actually wanted, or they misinterpreted or thought didn't matter. There were several times where we had someone approach and go, oh, I thought I was going to get the other option from whatever they got. So again, having that stock and having that experience and then going, no worries, we'll just shift this for you on the day. We had that stock available. So for us, a key component of it was the logistics. Make sure that we have kit so that we can give that flex. Because if someone comes to you and say, I got the wrong thing, but could I have that one? And they point at one of your other options. If you say absolutely, they're going to think you're a stellar organization who's flexible, adjusts to my. We only had 3 options, really, and most people were happy with one of those 3. And in the rare instances, they weren't. But then it was back to always making sure we had people handing out the kit if we could, always making sure we had that onboarding experience. We really took that to heart, that from our rollout project, make sure that someone talks to you on that first day, just goes through how it comes together. Every company has their own quirks on how you access intranet and policies, what it might be, and having a trusted human guide you through that just gave us really good feedback.
And I touched on a little bit of the notion that, or not even the notion, the fact that you've got to collaborate with other teams to get somebody completely onboarded. I think the biggest partner in that chain is HR. How did the partnership with HR drive the kind of innovation and success you've seen?
So there's a few teams above and beyond that. We also had I'm sure an identity access governance team that looked after a lot of these things, because being a financial organization, there are obviously a lot of restrictions and governance and frameworks that need to be adhered to. If you're an investor of investment professional of a certain type, you can't have access to that data, but you can have access to this data. So we had an entire team that was dedicated to the actual nitty gritty of what should you have access to, what would you need access to in your day to day. And I think they had more of a day-to-day interaction with HR, making sure that we followed all of the protocols that were required. But what we kept pushing for was that onboarding experience. We can do even more. As I left, I know one of the conversations we had was, can we get it to the point where can we ship you all of your kit maybe 2 to 3 weeks before you've joined? Because again, we drew out the process, right? We went, how many times do we rescind an offer after someone's gone through all of the interviews, they've signed the paper, they're about 3 weeks out from joining? Can we just ship them the kit, and that 1 in 100 or whatever it might be? I can't remember what number we got to, but it was astonishingly low. in that case, do we just pay for a courier, ship that back? Sorry, okay, send that back then. But for the other 99, you've already got a goodie box, right? We envisioned that you could stick some culturally appropriate things in there, if it's cheese or cookies or muffins or whatever, something that just gives you a bit of a, wow, they're already engaging with me 3 weeks prior, and there's no real skin off our back in tech. So I know those conversations were very heavily ongoing to go, actually, can we take that onboarding experience one step further? And I'm going to be keen to hear from my friends who's still there where they land up when they end up, actually.
Mhm. So that's actually a good segue into the kind of the follow up, taking it one step further. There's this concept that an employee is always onboarding. Things are changing so rapidly that there's really no finish line, and enablement never ends. You're always onboarding or enabling something. So, how was your onboarding approach extended beyond new hires to support that entire organization day to day?
Good question. So I think there were a few things we tried to do because an old CEO at the company I worked for said change is the only constant. That was,
Yep.
if you met him in the corridor, that would be what he said. That was his tagline. But it is interesting because we would see that sometimes we deployed sentiment feedback. So we gathered sentiment from everyone in the organization once every quarter, but we kind of paced it throughout the quarter. So we had, on the one hand, a bit of a temperature gauge whenever we did a big rollout or a change of something. Did we suddenly see a spike of people going, I don't really understand why we're doing this thing? Then we could trim or rather target our comms of going, okay, actually, well, we're getting some feedback here that people don't understand why we're doing something or what they seem misaligned with what we're doing. But most of the time, we used Slack predominantly, and so we made sure that we had an informal communication style that said, hey, this is happening, this is where it's going to come. If it was a bigger type of rollout, we would have sit-in sessions sometimes, depending on what type of change it was. Is it something that required training? Then we would try to provide more sit-in sessions. We had a really interesting situation with a merger of a company we brought on board, much smaller, maybe 10% the size of Man at Large, and they needed clearly understand a lot about what was different. So again, we did all of the engineering efforts, we made sure all of the applications worked, all of that, but then we had those sit-in sessions. We tried to explain what are the differences, what is it that you're going to get now, how does it work differently, and then we followed up on that in all of the channels we had available, including we always measured the sentiment. The sentiment was almost like our baseline of whatever else we were doing. We always referred back to that to see if we'd missed anything in our emails, in our other kind of instant messaging comms, etc.
And for anybody listening that's ever heard me talk at all out in public, you've heard me say technology is the easy part. It's the people that are hard. I've seen some teams
Absolutely.
hesitate to proactively reach out and ask questions because they've got an inability to act on the response, or there may be a fear of increasing ticket volumes. I've actually even heard executives say, we can't reach out to people because we don't know what we're going to get back. Why is that the wrong mindset?
I mean, it's interesting you mentioned this because that's a side story I'd like to share just before this. Is something I've been known to say to my team for a long time is imagine a firefighter who sees a fire and walks away from it. Pretty rubbish firefighter, right? And I think it's a mentality that we need to have when we're producing services. If there is a complaint that's brewing, you need to go and address that as early as you can. If someone is telling you, "Hey, I don't like this thing," go into it before it becomes a de facto situation. Oh, IT always does this. Whenever you hear that type of sentence structure, you've missed something. Like you're way after when it actually happens. So I always try to encourage that. If someone's being annoyed, that's great. Get in. it's not great that they're annoyed. It's great that you hear that they're annoyed because they're still willing to share with you. It's when people stop sharing with you that you're really up in a problematic situation, right? So I was very heavily in the camp of, well, let's communicate early, let's communicate transparently. Again, if we go back to the sentiment, I signed a sentiment campaign, so for those listening, a little pop-up on everyone's computer with my name, my picture, and my title. And I made it clear, I'm sending this to you. This isn't some nondescript function sending this. And every so often someone would reach out to me and I have every single time they would be annoyed at the beginning of it. At the end of it, they'd go, actually, that's really interesting when I got a chance to actually talk and engage. So I think from my own experience, if you are hiding from it, you're not, I'm going to be as bold as saying you're not really doing your job.
No, you're right. And I'll give you
Brutal.
another extension of that firefighter analogy. And the people who have heard me talk have heard this as well. They love being that IT firefighter. We loved running into the fire and putting the fire out. We solved the problem, but that problem is probably self-induced. There's an IT arsonist. We lit the fire a month ago, and then we show up to put out the blaze. That too is not sustainable. You can't run away from the fire, but you also have to stop lighting the fire.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, this is where all of the boring aspects of the job, or rather boring for others, I find them exhilarating, is where you have good patch scheduling, where you have good processes, and in all of these things that no one really sees, because with the best will in the world, if we did a perfect day-to-day operational job, we'll still have fires. So
Yeah.
why let's not focus that on the things we can prevent, right? Let's save our creativity and energy for there are going to be events that we just have no control over.
Mm-hmm.
And as we describe this kind of shift in the natural focal point of an IT professional, what's your view, Robin, on how IT is changing as a career or as a function, big picture or looking ahead 3 to 5 years? I mean, does it move organically closer to what we traditionally associate with HR in terms of really owning the employee experience at large? What's your view?
I think, almost like some teams have rebranded their HR acquisition to talent and talent teams, where you want to
Yeah.
retain talent, right? And
Yeah.
I think that when I started in tech, you could do tech for tech's sake. You could be into the nuts and bolts, and that was fine because there weren't many people who could do it. And we're seeing now, as there is a move in the industry towards technology is easier and easier to manage. Most things is now on a web portal. You don't need to have 20 years of experience to change a few settings. So I think the people who are going to be successful in technology are the people who are very mindful that you are an enabler. That is fundamentally what you're doing. You're providing tool set for the business to do their work. And I think another way I've thought about this is sometimes IT is in a very unfortunate position that you're stuck between you have to enforce certain standards, and these might be regulatory or from an internal governance body, whatever it might be, and you need to be the voice of reason for people who want to get their work done. So prove that you're on average always on the side of people who want to get work done, because you're going to need to say no for something. We're going to need passwords, unfortunately, for the foreseeable. We're going to need certain things still to maintain a secure environment, but earn that trust so that when you provide those guide rails, people don't immediately go deep sigh, IT has done a thing. Maybe instead, even if you get 2 more people to go, oh, actually, well, they have given some context. I can understand why. So I think as we're moving into the future, being mindful of what helps people is going to be what decides on who's successful in technology, because it's going to be so hard to do tech for tech's sake.
Before we let you go, Robin, and say goodbye, any further examples you haven't touched upon of how IT at Man Group was able to sort of act as an enabler of productivity? Anything you're particularly proud of that we haven't covered yet?
Well, actually, if I continue down the kind of password route. We're at a time in technology right now where it's really interesting. Without opening up for another half an hour segment on the topics of zero trust, we have some new security architecture and kind of ideas of thinking about tech that enables a better user experience and a higher security. And I think I would really encourage everyone to, while the terminology is big and might sound scary, it's passwordless and zero trust. We used it for good. So what we did was we tried to push more for using biometrics, so face, fingerprint, things like that. Make sure that actually, how can we reduce the frequency that we ask you for passwords by looking at other things like, is your device patched? Is it actually safe and compliant for other reasons? So we managed to leverage this one rare occasion of higher security and higher user experience, and we deployed that at large and let people go, well, you pick the one you prefer. If you want to type a long password, you do that, or you could just use your face. And then again, we didn't mandate it because some people, certainly in mainland Europe, there are some countries that are a bit more apprehensive about using biometric for authentication, whereas other parts of the world, they're clearly like, no, absolutely. If I can use my fingerprint, I'm doing that all day, every day. And we even deploy that all the way to administrators getting access, privileged access into certain systems where they needed a second fingerprint. So really proud of how we try to combine. And as I said, we try to earn that trust that, hey, we're actually doing a really good thing for you, so that when we come to say no on something, you at least understand that's because we couldn't do anything else.
Sure. And we've got into a lot of specifics here, Robin, but I mean, big question to end on. What would your vision of a truly universal white glove IT experience look like in the boldest, broadest sense?
I mean, it is hard to imagine that the AI and LLM trend is going to go away. So I think what would be really cool to me is if you can tap these into the general knowledge base of a company, if you can have these contextualized helpers, agents that go, hey, actually, someone else encountered this problem, and you could even tweak how you prefer having the language. If you're an executive, you normally want quite terse, very actionable information. If you're more junior or maybe technically inclined, you want to get a bit more verbose, and the ability to meet every person where they are. So you can help, not only do you write your message, but you have maybe these technologies to actually adopt, oh, okay, I know Robin likes to have the context, so give him a little bit of a blurb on the context before we give them this message. And if we think about old school white glove service, it would be a person that runs up to you and helps you with whatever you want. And if we move that into the digital age, it would be some type of agent that goes, hey, I see what Microsoft tried to do with Clippy 20 years ago. Maybe the world is finally ready for it, but a good one. I really think that it's that you can get expertise from the entire company much faster, and you can get it tailored to how you like to be spoken to, and then you can take it to a human if you need to after.
We love it, Robin. Love to having you on. Listen, I'm sure you've acquired some new admirers today. If anyone wanted to reach out to you and have a conversation about bringing this level of sophistication and nuance to their own organization, I presume they come to you through LinkedIn. Would that be right?
Absolutely, please.
Excellent. Well, look, I mean, we certainly commend it. And Robin, it was lovely to see you again post experience, and thanks for telling us about that amazing era at Man Group. It was really fascinating.
Good stuff, Robin.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure, gentlemen.
To make sure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure to leave a rating of the show. Just tap the number of stars you think the podcast deserves. If you'd like to learn more about how NextThink can help you improve your digital employee experience, head over to nextthink.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.